Yeah, we are live now. So, hey folks, this is me, Vishwajnan. I'm the host of this DevOps chat show. A lot of times I've realized, you know what? There's no age, there's no barriers to anything and everything that you want to learn. It's always that perspective that you really want. Like, I want to solve this problem statement. I'm going to go to any extent to solve it. And I think Abhishek is one of those people that you have to look back at in order to realize, okay, what? Here is a person who can really help you solve a problem statement, which helps you in getting the best version of what you are. I think I'm glad that I'm part of Ops3 and I'm getting a chance to learn with amazing folks here. So let's get the question started. And also, there is a lot of insights that he can share in terms of Terraform, in terms of open source. Of course, he's the open source guru in Ops3, by the way. So you can go ahead, just ask for what can I contribute for Ops3 in the open source world. You're good to go. And thank you so much, Abhishek, for being on my show. Means a lot.
Yeah, it's mutual Vishwas. I'm also feeling obliged to hear.
Sure, can you talk a little louder? Like it would be better. Like if you can
Yeah,
talk a
I
little.
think if you want, I can connect my earphones as well. Just give me a second.
Sure, go ahead. That's not a problem.
I think that would be better, and you will be able to hear me clearly.
Yep. Because I think because when the screen goes right, the background just drops out into.
Sure, sure. I think you will be able to hear me better.
Yep.
I, is it better now?
Yep. It's absolutely better. It's absolutely better. So yes, let's start with this question. What was your journey as a cloud professional, and how did you see this industry grow of what we are seeing today? Like, what was cloud computing when you started your profession, and how has it evolved today in your professional life cycle?
So to be honest, Vishwas, when I started with a data center based companies. So initially, it was not something which the people were a lot of on the cloud side. When I started, the people still were running a lot of things on the on premises and the data center. So I have seen the pains and I have feel the pain of the running the application and the complete stack over the what I can say on the data center on the on premises. But as soon as I was introduced to the DevOps, and when you introduce to the DevOps, the first thing you only get introduced with the cloud. And for me, initially it was AWS. Then I came to know there are a lot of things in the market available like GCP, Azure, and all those things. And when I started working on the cloud, and I started evaluating the different types of things that we can do over the cloud, I was completely amazed that it's making our life so much easier. I don't have to, because to be honest, I was working with a data center based company, and what I had to do there, we have to procure a server. And to procure a server, I had to do a research of a month, and then I go and purchase the inventory of each and every server provider, Lenovo, Dell, and then we had to take a server and we set up the application. So that's so
Got
much
it.
pain
So
about to set up a single application. And when I see
yes.
as a cloud professional, I think the things have been revolutionized and have been changed completely since cloud has hit the industry, because now you don't have to worry about, you don't have a single click application set up in AWS, Azure, GCP. Or nowadays a lot of people are working with the hybrid architecture as well. Some things are over the on premises, some things are over the cloud as well, but that's something which people are doing on the large scale. But when we talk about a startup or a mid-sized company, when they are starting, I think the cloud is becoming their first choice to be start with, because in that case they don't have to worry about the other we can say moving or the additional components like which cloud can take care of it. Otherwise for that they have to take a lot of pain, because DC is not easy, data center thing is not easy at all.
Yep. That's the truth. People talk mainframes, and if you talk mainframes today, sorry, you are in a stone age, and nobody wants to talk with you. There's that world of serverless. Of course,
Yeah,
Kida is also coming up. There is a lot. So now that journey was awesome. Like you really told me that you didn't go to the college. You still were there in the ops tree.
yeah.
You're completed 6+ years in ops tree, right? Like that's the
Around six
journey
years
that you had.
Yeah,
Yeah,
around
6 years almost. Yeah, that's how it is. So yeah, let's come to the DevOps practices because a lot of time that is something that is untouched, and I think
yeah.
folks like you giving out some insights will mean a lot to us. So, is DevOps a complex piece of puzzle in an organization today? What do you feel about the way that we are building tech, and also can you also talk about architecting a good strategy, because totally it's up to us as an engineer in order to prioritize
Um,
that thing.
if I talk about this particular part, I don't see that DevOps is a complex piece of puzzle. It's only about how the organization adapts it. So basically, when I joined Opstree, to be honest, we were having a lecture over the DevOps. What exactly is DevOps? Initially, we had these sessions because the DevOps was a very new thing that time. So Shankar Jha, the co-founder and the CEO of Opstree, he was talking about the DevOps and he explained it very beautifully. He talked about it and he said that DevOps is more of a not a profile; it's more of a mindset and a practice. That when we talk about a DevOps, generally what we say, we have created the positions for the DevOps. But the DevOps, what exactly he's doing, he's solving the problem between two different teams, whether it's a development team and the operations teams. He's more of an intimidator coming in between and solving the problem which people are not generally tackling very easily. So I don't see it's a very complex thing. It's more of a thing which people have to adapt, because right now, as far as I can see, people say that we are working as a DevOps and they are created the DevOps vacancy, but still they are asking them to do the operation works. Because but as far as I see, DevOps should be something like that who will be handling most of the we can say designing and architecting of the different system. Whether you are talking about the cloud based infrastructure, where the cloud, how the cloud infrastructure should be designed, whether you talk about the infrastructure on premises, the DevOps should be able to capable of doing that as well, monitoring, logging, and all these things, whatever the end to end things which we need to implement for an application stack, whether it's an infrastructure, build and release, deployment strategies, the monitoring, we can say security right now as well as a part of the DevOps practices now. All these things are needs to be covered by the DevOps team itself. And once you are done with that, you can also contribute to a well architected framework in terms of the development as well. Because since we are talking about the DevOps, the DevOps means development plus operations. So it is one of the responsibility from the development side for DevOps as well, that he evaluates the different solution from the development side as well. What can be inculcated in the development practices to make it more secure and better? Whether it's a new technology, whether it's a new framework, all these things are needs to be evaluated by it, and they can provide these suggestions to the different teams. So for example, for the operations perspective, he can suggest that these are the things which we can implement to make our system more insightful. And he can also guide the development team as well, that these are the practices you should do to make your application code much more secure, or let's say much more manageable. I'll give you a very simple piece of example. Let's say um, we write the application. In the application we write the logging logic. So as I was working in the company and they were writing the logics in terms of the simple text, and what they had to do, they had to create a different parsers to parse those texts. And let's say whenever they are adding a new field inside that text line, we had to do rewrite the parser again. So I evaluated the thing that how people are solving this problem, and I came across one thing. This is called JSON logging. So if they convert their logging into the JSON structure, you don't have to write the parsers, because that's a key value pair and it will be automatically parsed. So this is the thing I suggested to the developer, and my life became very much easier. I do not need to write any parser for any time. And I see that's how DevOps can work. But I don't see it's a very complex piece of puzzle. It's all about adapting that mindset in the organization.
Sure, because a lot of times when I see Austrians, we are young folks.
Yeah.
Of course, we are still young as an Austri, but we have
Yeah.
had a
Okay.
good amount of impact, right? Once you see the way our company is perceived in the market, it's like, Austri is known for DevOps. You don't have to doubt about it. That's how it is.
Exactly.
So we are actually going through a lot. All right, there are some questions popping up. So, Satya Kumar, what does a DevOps engineer differ from an SRE?
Okay. So yeah. Um, so mainly the DevOps part is more of an part where we are talking about setting up the complete infrastructure and the architecture part. But when we talk about the SRE perspective, SRE is a little more beyond than that, to be honest, what I see. Because let's say when we are talking about the site reliability engineer means that you need to make sure that your application site, or we can say the application or the build site, all these things are completely up. We cannot say that it is going down because of this reason or XYZ reason. An SRE cannot say that this is my not concern area. An SRE is more like a person who will be owning that complete application stack, whether it's from the development and where you can say the if there's a development issue, or let's say the operation issue or the database issue, any XYZ field we can say talk about. So that's what SRE generally does. But SRE definition generally varies to organization to organization. Some people use SRE as a people who will be like creating some insightful information over it and monitoring all those things. And some people talk about SRE as an expert who will be knowing end to end any about any technology, whether it's a DevOps related thing, or we can say database related or development related thing. So it's depend on the organization how they are defining the SRE part.
Yeah, I
I
think
think there are
it's a purpose. It's a purpose. You
it's
need
a
not have to
purpose.
define anybody's role here. Everybody can contribute. Let's say an EM who doesn't work in your microservices department can also come and say, you know what, I'm also facing the same old issue. Probably
Exactly.
you are on the same stack and you can still face the same issues. I think that's how it is. All right. Many people are coming about questions. So okay, Monisha's questions. What is the role of release manager and how much it includes the DevOps skills? So that's the
Um,
question.
I think this one I can answer is easily. I guess. So when we talk about a release manager, the release manager has a very we can say easy and difficult responsibility at a perspective. They have to release a code, but they have to make sure when they are releasing the code, the application code is not getting down. And when we are talking about the release manager is responsible of taking the code to the different various environment, whether it's development environment, QA environment, testing, or let's say we the production environment. And so if I talk about the release manager in terms of the DevOps skills, they must have a very good grasp on the continuous integration side. The continuous integration includes the different phases, like you should be able to do the code quality check, the code security check, then unit testing, and like the analysis of the code, then releasing that code, then deploying that code, all these things. So you should have a very good grasp on the continuous integration in the deployment if you want to work as a release manager.
Yeah, to add on to that, I just wanted to say, we have a product called as Build Piper. The amount of course, it's not an endorsement, by the way. It's just an humble attempt that we are saying, you know what, we have built an amazing product which is going to make your life much more easier. Because
Right.
to me, when I come to the agility of the team, it's always about how bad do we want to deliver to production every single day. Or it's like how often do we want to build and deploy it as soon as possible. I think there is a huge demand that gets created. I think this is where you go to the team, talk to them, understand what's your need of that, then push the code into the production. That's what release managers can also do. So keep that in mind. So let's go on to the next question. I think there's one question from Pranjal. We'll just take it soon. Also, if you want to talk, we can just talk about it. Talking about
Yeah,
the
no,
future
about
of
the DevOps
DevOps.
as a great future choice to go for. Yeah, I think it's a great future to go on. The only thing is that when you talk about the DevOps, you should have a very creative and learning mindset. Because let's say in DevOps, I talk about the technologies will change quite rapidly. What I have seen in my past as well. For example, we talk about 3 4 years back, people still were a lot on the cloud side. The lot of applications were deployed on the cloud side. Then suddenly the market take a boom on the containerization side. Kubernetes became the next big thing, and the people want to have a Kubernetes in their system anyhow. So if you talk about that time kind of thing, so when you are talking about the DevOps, you should be have a very good learning mindset, that you should always be learning a new technologies or the new way of addressing the things or solving the problems. Because when you solve a problem, it's not like that you have solved the problem that will be an optimal way. For that particular time it might be an optimal way, but in future that it could be solved a better way. So I think that's one thing I can talk about it. The other thing, as a DevOps, I can talk about, if you have a little experience on the programming side, it will surely help you a lot to understand the things better. But if you don't have, I think you have to put a little extra effort, but it's not like it's not doable. It's always doable. People are doing it, and I think most of the people are doing it. But if you have a little programming experience, I think it is going to help you a lot in that sense.
Sure. So let's just address this question about being a consumer. Of course, we are all developers. We see how the pipeline is. One of the conferences they asked me, what do you do once the application goes down or if once the application is not working? I'm like, why is DevOps engineer not scaling? That was my answer. That means like I'm thinking like, why is DevOps engineers not working in that company and things like that. That's how I do it. I don't say, okay, why are they not giving me the services or not. I'm like, okay, there is something, a production downtime. So yeah, that's how it is. So now we are a set of developers. We know the developer space as well as the operation space. But let's just talk about the consumers market. So how do you think that we are perceiving technology today as a consumer? Is it changing with the developer's mindset, or else what is it all about?
I think so. Basically, there are two types of consumer. We can talk about a tech consumer and a non-tech consumer. So when we talk about a non-tech consumer, they might not be a lot of, we can say, aligned with the how the website is behaving. But to be honest, as far as I can tell, I'm from the technical background. So what I do generally when I open a site, I actually check the response of that site if they are working fast or not. If it is slow, I generally judge them that why the site is not working fast, why exactly it is slow, have they not implemented their infrastructure much in a better way. Let's say I generally judge my college website a lot. It's super slow, and I actually say that what exactly they are doing even. And the one thing is that, but I can say one thing which is from the consumer end, which becomes a very important thing, is nowadays is the security side. The people want to be assured that when they are providing some information to an application, or let's say, or any kind of website or something like that, they must feel assured that their application, their data is safe. Because we have seen a lot of incident from the past. What exactly happens, because of a minor mistake, their data has been breached and they have to suffer through it. Because let's say we are a company, and let's say in our company we are working on something and we are uploading the data over S3 bucket, and we were not implementing it very optimally, and let's say by mistakenly we have made the S3 bucket public. All the data which we have uploaded till now, there the personal informations of our consumers, that will go public, and they will lose the trust from our application or the website, and they will never come back again. So that's what can one thing can happen. So one thing I see from the consumer perspective, nowadays people are worried about their security of their data security as well. So that is one thing. The second thing, application performance is always the factor. So for example, let's say and the downtime. Let's say if I'm searching something on the Google, let's say I'm searching for a hotel booking site, and the first site comes up on the top, and if I open it and it is not behaving in a better way, I will go to the second or third site, whether it's coming on the top or not. But performance is one of the major factor for me as well. So I think these are the things from the consumer, and I can see people are observing and they are taking actions towards it. So that's what I see.
Yeah, me too. Like, I just go back to my college website. I just see like how are they performing back to back? Because that's a crazy example that you can really give to your entire
Exactly.
production line engineers who are like, you know what, we have a very slow website. No, just go back, see my college website. You will be shocked. That's how it
Yeah,
is.
and
So
it
yeah.
and I guess
So
it's not always about the DevOps or the infrastructure part. It's always a mutual thing. Let's say how the developer have designed their code. That is also one of the things which actually impacts
yeah.
all these things. So it's a mutual responsibility. I can say that how the application should work. So you can so basically again it will be the same thing. Someone will blame the code and someone will blame the infrastructure. But there should be
Yep.
some mediation, that you are creating an optimal solution from both perspective, from the infrastructure perspective as well, and from the development perspective. I can see a very good example, Hotstar. They stream India Pakistan match and they were able to handle that much of a load, like 1.4 crore users live. That's not an easy thing.
True. Yeah, that's true. I think I have been watching all the Has Geek talks and everything based on the observability,
Exactly.
the various scale. I think yeah, they are amazing engineers. You need to follow them for sure. And of course,
Exactly.
like Obsti also has great engineers. Do check out us. Like if you want to have a podcast, we are open in the LinkedIn. Just come talk to us. We'll just be ready to give you a podcast. By the way, so you also saw on-premises solution. So let's talk about like what can a happy monolith teach the world of the DevOps today? Because we are talking too much complex puzzles. We're talking this and
of
that.
microservices.
Serverless is this, serverless is that. But at the end of the day, your business logic doesn't work in four lines of well-optimized code as well. So it's a complex puzzle. So
Right.
what can happy monoliths teach to us about the world of DevOps and how not to think complex? By the way.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Vishwas. To be honest, um, as like you can see that since Kubernetes became a big thing in the market and the container technologies, people are shifting toward the microservices architecture. They are developing number of microservices. For example, I was working with a organization. Um, for a to handle their business, they have like 700 microservices to handle their operations, and they are running it over the Kubernetes and managing all those things. But one thing I have seen with the microservices that when you are working with the microservices, you have need to have a mindset of a microservice that you are completely want to go with the microservice, because around that you have to build that ecosystem that can support a microservice. But when we are talking about a monolith, it becomes a little bit easier, to be honest. Because in that sense, what we have to do, people don't have to spend too much on the, let's say, programming side or all these things. Because when we talk about the microservices uh, brings few more things inside the system: multiple programming languages, multiple types of databases, multiple ways of handling the things. But when we talk about the monolith based application, it's a simple compiled application, and then you have a simple database through you have to manage it. So what exactly people generally do, um, what I have seen over the past of the years, when people have started their business, they generally go with a monolith approach because for them it totally makes sense. I can say that neither the monolith is a silver bullet or the microservice is a silver bullet. It's all about which is fulfilling your use case. And for a new startup or for a new organization which is starting in the market, for them monolith will always be a preferred choice, because for that they don't have to hire too much of the engineers, they don't have to spend too much on the infrastructure and all those things. They have the simple development method, they can develop the application and they can deploy it. So I have seen these things over the past, Vishwas, that what exactly people do, they start their business with the monolith. They go with the monolith, they do all the things with the monolith application deployment release, and they don't facing issue. But when they are facing the issue, then they thought about shifting to the microservices, because when the scale comes in, then you think about it. But when you are starting, that is not your concern area, that I'm getting the too much of the scale. But ideally it should be, but a lot of people don't think about it. So in that case, then they shift about the microservices and they start breaking their application into the microservices. So one of this popular model I have seen, that start with the monolith, live with the monolith, and then face issues with the monolith and then divide it into microservices. So that's one of the thing I have seen in the industry from quite a period of time.
Yeah, that's true because a lot of times architecting microservices takes a huge amount of
Amount
gap,
of
right?
time
It's
development.
something like you can't afford a Java developer, a Go developer, a Python developer for different microservices.
Exactly.
Probably you're a team of 10 who knows pretty well good in Java. Just go ahead, just build something. Nobody
Exactly.
wants to know it's a monolith until and unless it breaks and you really come up with. So yeah, I think even serverless also is one of those components in any of the
Yes.
microservices. I think everything is APIs today, so don't worry about that. So I think
Right.
it's an apt question that he has asked now. When you say DevOps is a developer and operations, I want to understand what level of development is actually needed. I'm asking because I'm working as a cloud and a DevOps engineer from last 4 years, but never really got a chance to work with the development phase. But when I started looking at a new opportunity, most of the interviewer expect me to have an easy to medium PS algo. Okay, fine. Like this is all towards the perspective of the technology and the industry. I think this is a right and an apt question to move forward with respect to SRE and DevOps practices question. I think you can answer this now.
Yeah. So, to be honest, I see if we talk about what level of understanding we should a development a DevOps should have, I think at least scripting knowledge should be enough. Because let's say when we talk about the different parts of it, the automation, the general automation start with the writing the automation scripts. So you guys, as a DevOps guy, we guys are like write a lot of automation script, whether it's in the shell script or a Python or Go XYZ, wherever you want to write it. But when we are talking about when the interviewers are asking about the DS and data structure and all these things, that is something more related to programming specific only. So if you see in that perspective, I think the people are expecting nowadays uh, that DevOps should have a programming knowledge as well. Because what I have seen, that a lot of developers now are acquiring the knowledge of DevOps. To be honest, the developer guys are able to write the Kubernetes manifest, Helm charts, all these things, and they are able to deploy it without the need of DevOps. So there is a vice versa case where people are expecting you to have a development knowledge so that you can fulfill their different use cases. It's not about they want you to do the programming; they just want to understand your logical mindset, that how exactly you are going to create the logic, how exactly you are going to solve the problems. So that is more about it. But when we are talking about the development, it's not like you should have a core development thing, but a basic development knowledge would be enough, I think. For example, how exactly what is a variable and all those things, if you have that certain level of knowledge, I think that would be sufficient. Because you are not we are not working in the core development part. So in that perspective, I think a basic programming knowledge would be fine. Understanding the basic DS, or let's say what is function, classes, object oriented programming, etc., etc.
Yeah, like if you have it, it's a bonus. By the way, it's like you still know for the
Always.
fact that everything is going to be on code which is getting pushed. Like it's a herd of developers, swarm of developers pushing in the code in
It's
one GitHub repository.
it
Yeah,
always give you a different perspective, to be honest, Vishwas. What happens exactly when you're working with the DevOps, you are using that tool, but when you are
yes,
have a programming mindset, you break things in your mind, what
yeah,
exactly it is doing in the behind the
that's
scene.
true.
For example, when I'm using a Kubernetes from a DevOps perspective, I know that this is the magic happening. But when I've been working in the development, I know what exactly the Kubernetes is doing to make this magic happen. And that is the real, to be honest, for real joy for me. So to understand how exactly it is working behind the scene.
Yeah, it's all file systems to me, right? It's Unix. It's Unix at the end of the day, made
It's
look
Unix.
much more nicer and with a polished look. I think I think the question that he asked is for what is the difference between Azure DevOps and generic DevOps? If someone learns generic DevOps, then if some Azure DevOps vacancies is there any point companies hire generic DevOps guys? I think yeah, you can answer this well.
So basically, again, Azure DevOps is a technology or a tool through which you can implement the CI/CD and the pipelines and all those things. Whatever the automation you want to do, not only CI/CD, it's about the automation. Let's say any automation you want to do, you can create the pipelines over the Azure DevOps and you can manage it, like releasing the code, like deploying it, or doing any kind of schedule operations, XYZ, whatever the automation related work you want to do. But generic DevOps is more of a mindset. It's not limited to CI/CD. There are a number of things which generally DevOps plays an important role. For example, architecting the infrastructure, that is one of the major responsibility as a DevOps engineer. Then implementing that infrastructure, then implementing the CI/CD pipelines and all those things to how to do that, which Azure DevOps can be part of it. But Azure DevOps could not be completely DevOps things. It's more about doing the same thing which a part of the DevOps, the continuous integration and the deployment and the automation. So using that, you can easily that do that kind of thing. Then the monitoring and all those things comes into the picture. So Azure DevOps is more of a tool that can solve the problem for a DevOps, but it's not something which is solving the complete DevOps ecosystem, because DevOps ecosystem is quite bigger, and that needs to be solved with the various tools and and a different mindset.
Like I can give you one example. Okay, don't think DevOps only. Go read a book called as Toyota Kata, Toyota Production System. You really understand that they did the DevOps, but there was no tools like Jenkins. There was no tools like what do you call Argo CD or anything. Even there was no build backup, by the way. There was no build backup, by the way, back then. They still did the automation. They still, Toyota is known for that scale. The engineers, the product managers are very influential. Just go back and look at it. You will remove the fact that there is tools in the DevOps. That's the mindset that you need to remove. I think that's the best part about it. Yeah, I think that's a great answer, by the way, Abhishek. So let's go on with this SRE and the value of treating it as an operations problem statement. Because I love the fact that we love to keep the business up and running, and we still go
Right.
back with the business values back there. MDTA, MDTR, SLI, SLOs, you name it, it's there. All these
Yeah.
matrices. So SRE and the value of treating the operations problem as a software engineering problem statement. What is a real IT transformation that we need to witness? Because a lot of the things that are coming up today based on the SRE and the things which are coming around it, like tools, the technologies, the frameworks which are coming up, the standards that we are setting, it's changing.
Exactly.
So, what's your goal about? What is your thoughts about? Not the goal. Like, Obsti
Goals
has a
are
goal
quite
about
yeah.
it. Obsti has a goal
Goals quite
about it.
aspiration. Yeah.
Obsti has a goal to it. I know that for sure. They still are yet to pioneer that. Of course, we'll come back to it. Like, what's your thoughts about this operations problem statement considered in the software engineering problem statements?
So when we talk about the SRE, just like we have already talked about, site reliability engineer has a very specific responsibility to make that your application is completely up and it is not going to down. It's maintain the SLA what you have committed on. And to do that, when we talk about the SRE, there are multiple things that SRE does. For example, matlab, like SRE and we can say DevOps, so multiple people are doing that, implementing the infrastructure and all those things. But once you have set up each and everything, let's say you have been gone to the productionize, the next thing, set of big thing is the monitoring part. I think as an IT operations and the SRE, the next thing which is evolving the monitoring, because right now I still see the peoples are doing the monitoring, they are creating the dashboards, but after still that people are facing the downtime. And the reason is that once we have that thing, we have to minimize the alerts. It's not always that when we have set up the alerting, we have set up the monitoring, we are getting that and we are fixing it on a temporary basis. It needs to be fixed on a temporary basis. So in with that mindset, we have to work towards to make our system more stable. And you have to build that very strong ecosystem, because let's say if we are facing something, if we are facing a downtime or if we are facing an issue, we should learn towards it. Like for example, if I'm getting one issue from the network side, I will always keep that in my mind. But whenever I'm building another ecosystem, I will keep network monitoring in place so that I will not face this issue in my future. So again, it's all about, for example, whatever the things I am seeing, according to that I'm going to create the different monitoring ecosystems around me to support that my system is always up. And after once I'm done, I will be creating the alerting there on the basis of that. So whatever the level of alerting I want to define, I will define accordingly, and according to that I will define. So for example, for whatever the alert categorization I have to do, for example, it could be P3, P2, P1, P0, which is not non-impacting, it will can go to the less severity, but which is more critical, I will have it now high severity, and I can send a, we can say, pager duty calls to the people so that they can simply take an attention and fix that site up. But nowadays, one other thing which I see, Vishwas, that SRE are doing a lot of automation. So what exactly are they doing? Let's say if they know that exactly if this issue comes, that's how we have to fix it. They have an automation run book in their mind. So what exactly they do? They define their alerting system something like that, that it will send you a notification that there's an alert, but after that it will send you that same notification to your automation system, and your automation system will try to remediate that problem. So till the time you are actually taking an action, that issue may be fixed. So that's how the people are taking SRE on the next level, that it's not only catching and passing, we are something doing about it. So yeah, that's
Sure.
my take on that, Vishal.
I think, yeah, I was answering this question. We have a lot of open source projects, by the way. So if you want to know where's the solution for it, it's here. So we have a plethora of open source projects which addresses different problem statements, databases, containers. That means we have containers for Redis, we have containers for Elastics, Terraform,
Yeah,
Docker, you name it, we still have it. If you think of automation, lot of Ansible automation.
right.
Yeah, I think Satya Kumar, you can just go ahead, just get all these
We
projects,
actually contribute to, yeah, major areas of the whether it's a cloud, container, automation. So yeah,
databases, you
but
name
I
it,
think,
we still have there.
yep. I think Satya has asked one other question. If I would like to contribute to an open source, where I can start. Acha,
Yeah,
okay, you
yeah,
have
that
already
was
shared.
what I was asking. Yeah.
But one thing I would like to suggest here, Satya, instead of reading the complete code base or the going like from the scratch, what I generally do when I want to understand an open source project and I want to contribute it. Let's say when I started contributing to Kubernetes and Prometheus, I knew the Golang, but their code base is too much large. I cannot understand it completely. So what exactly I do? In the GitHub issues, you have an option of low hanging fruit where they list down. Okay, shall we separate the monitoring for L1 or it should be single monitoring implementation? Speaking of monitoring, shall we separate monitoring for L1, L2, and dev teams, or it should be as one single monitoring implementation? Uh,
Yeah, I think he joined.
yeah,
Okay, let's
join
just
finally.
complete the open source thing. If you have
Yeah,
the
yeah. But
sheet
just
you
wanted
wanted
to.
to, I
Yeah,
think probably you can share the screen and show what is those places that you can go as an issues or something. Yeah, I think that can be better.
yeah. Just give me a second. I think.
I think we have a lot of issues, by the way. I think you can do that. I think Sandeep sir has asked a great question, by the way. We'll address that. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it.
No, no. We will surely
Folks,
address
just
that.
keep waiting because this is an amazing question, by the way. I think if you have to share your questions, just go ahead with it.
Share screen. So basically, what exactly I do? So basically, this is a project of ops tree. And according to that, for example, let's say I see that if someone wants to contribute to this project, the Redis operator, it's a project for setting up Redis on Kubernetes on a production base and a secure model. So there are a lot of issues you can see people have raised here. But let's say when I analyze these issues and I see that there's an issue which a new um, a beginner in the open source contribution can solve, I actually label it with a good first issue. So you can simply filter out all the issues with this particular part. A lot of are closed with this. If you filter it out here, and you can see a lot of, so these are the labels through which you can identify that these are the issues which can be a good start for me as a beginner in the open source contribution, and according to that you will be able to do the change, because as a project I have the understanding what is the issue will be good for a newcomer or not. So this is one of the example in my project, but if you go to a most of the popular open source project you will find this kind of thing there. They always put a label there for the newcomers so that they can join their community and fix these kind of issues.
Sure. I think that's the best way to start. I think, of course, he showed our repository, by the way. So go ahead, contribute. So let's address Sandeep sir's question. So speaking of monitoring, shall we separate monitoring of L1, L2 dev teams, or should be one single monitoring implementation? So I think that's a
Uh,
great question, by the way.
yeah, I also feel that. Although he's a guru, so he must be asking the great questions then. What I see here, it should be a federation-based model. I think when we create a separate monitoring for L1, L2, and the dev teams, we can say, uh, the only thing I can see, the manageability becomes a thing that you have to manage the multiple monitoring systems and associated team with it. But the another thing will be that let's it will be a less point of failure. It will not become a single point of failure, because if your monitoring system is completely stuck or it is completely down, in that case what can happen, you will not get any kind of notification, you will not get like it is down or not. So if you have this kind of model, it has both pros and cons. But when we are talking about it, it could be a federation base that, let's say, what I have seen, people can have multiple monitoring systems, let's say separate monitoring for L1, L2, and dev teams. And after that, what they have a federation model where they can have a central monitoring, which is monitoring L1, L2, and dev team. Because the rationale behind is that, because when we are coming uh, as a consumer or a different guy, I don't want to open too many of the dashboards and monitor it. I need a single pane of glass through which I can see my system is up or not. So single point of monitoring can also help me there. So it could be a federation based model where I can implement this, and then I have a system on top of it which is taking the metrics from it and analyzing and consolidating it at single place.
Yeah, that's true. That's true because you don't have to overwhelm the developer space. Like you don't have to do that because it's a lot of chaos that they are facing with respect to optimizing the code, SaaS strategies, giving them constant notification of vulnerabilities. I think that's enough
Right.
for them to keep them busy. So I think multiple monitoring models has to be there. I think that gives an information about the code which they have written, the performance which they are getting, and of course, it makes sure that they understand what is performance that is required for them to code. Like something like there is an update in the Kubernetes version and the old code base is not working proper. That means
Exactly.
you need to evolve. Yeah, I think there's a lot. So let's get on to the anti-patterns, which is there in the world today, in the world of DevOps. Like DevOps is filled with a lot of
Yes,
anti-patterns.
true.
Like people say this worked for me and everybody wants to go there. And I would say it doesn't work for everybody. So let's talk that. Let's understand what is a DevOps anti-pattern and
Yeah, I
what is
actually
it
seen
doing.
that a lot.
Yeah, I know
The
that.
thing you're talking about, yeah. Like for
Yeah,
example, if we open a GitHub issue and we see that the first comment it works for me, we don't see what exactly he guided. We just copy paste that thing and we say that now I should try this. It should work for me as well. So if we talk about the anti patterns, it's more of a thing. People do to test the things, but then it is something which we have to obsolete to make our system better. For example, I was talking to you, and then we were talking about the SSH connection, and the
yep.
people are making the port open and they forgot about it, so because they were doing the testing. Because as a part of a debugging, what people do, they open the firewall port, they do the testing and then forgot about it, that I have made it open. So one thing is that we should not do that kind of thing. And that's one of the example. The other examples could be like, for example, people set up the infrastructure, but they don't want to evolve their infrastructure or modernize it, because they think like this infrastructure is stable for me, it is working completely fine, whether it's going on the legacy model or something like that. But still people don't want to move it, because I have seen a lot of infrastructure is running on a operating system which are like obsolete, or we can say end of life, like 3 or 4 years back as well. Yeah, we will talk about that question as well. Okay, so that kind of thing we can always do that. So these are few anti patterns which I have seen people are doing there. And as a DevOps, we should be making a mindset that if we are implementing something, we will be implementing that at a better way, whether it's taking a little much more time. Because what happens sometimes, to save the time, we make something that which becomes a very big issue for us in the future to solve it. But if we are making some investment of time in the future, uh, while making a pattern better, for example, implementing all those things which is making our system secure, creating the patching life cycles, so that for every software release we are doing the patching of each and every software and the operating system, these kind of things, that is really going to help us in the future. Whether I agree that it will be a time taking process in the present time, but in the future it is going to solve a lot of problems. So there are a lot of DevOps anti patterns, but I have seen that organization have started addressing them as well, Vishwas. So I have seen that people are facing this issue, but now I see that people are working towards audit as well. They call the third party auditors and they do the auditing of their system, and after the auditing of their system, they take the input, and according to that they modernize their infrastructure as well. So I think people have started thinking towards the anti patterns as well, because they know the cost of it, because it is always going to cost us in terms of the business.
Sure, I think this is where MLOps, FinOps, and chaos operations come into the picture. Because we need to stress test this system. We need to make sure that our people understand where is Kubernetes not able to scale. Like something like, is 8 clusters that we are managing today enough for the future traffic that we are just going to face? Or something like, what if one of the clusters shut down, one of the pods shut down, or something like there is a chaos in everything. So I think, yeah, I think you can address this in your own terms.
Yeah.
But yeah, MLOps, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's totally a lot, to be honest. For example, just like we have the DevOps, in the DevOps itself we are not able to sustain, we can say absorb it completely. So MLOps, FinOps, and ChaosOps are, these are the new modern operations things which we have added in our bucket list. So for example, initially we had the DevOps, then we have the DevSecOps, where we added the security as a part of the development, security plus operations. Now we have integrated operations with the multiple things. We have the ML, where the machine learning operations things will become a part of a separate team. The FinOps is also one of the thing which we are talking about it. Now this chaos ops is also one of the thing. Actually, this term I think given by the, I guess I'm pretty much sure, is Netflix only. They started this chaos thing a while back, where they have the chaos department only, and they created a lot of chaos tool which actually do the negative kind of testing. Because as a person, what we generally do, whatever the things which we set it up, we treat it very calmly, and we can say in a very positive way, that we are setting all the testing all the positive use cases, but we are not thinking about the negative one. So the chaos ops is something which is quite getting popular in the market, and people are developing a lot of ecosystem around it. For example, Netflix Chaos Monkey is one of the very good example, where it actually integrate in your system and do the negative testing. And negative testing in the sense, it will try to make your system down at any cost, and you have to make sure your system is not getting down, and according to that you will develop your practices, something like that. Similarly, Gremlin is also one of the tool which is getting popular in the market and people are using it. So chaos engineering is also one of the thing which provides us how to tackle the bad time. So for example, when your application is down, you will be creating a lot of ecosystem around it, that your application is not going down. So you will be doing a lot of automation, you will be having a DR, all those things you will keep in your mind, that when I'm integrating this tool, this will make my application down, and I have to make sure that my application is not down. So when there's a major outage or a complete outage in a region or availability zone, still it is not going to impact your system. So that's more about it. But yeah, that is something right now DevOps is I guess picking their hands. They are putting their hands in the chaos engineering, FinOps, and the MLOps side. Yeah, entire Simian army. That's correct.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
yeah, that's true. So this is one of the area where the DevOps is also putting their hand.
Yeah, that's true because ML as an whole new infrastructure which just got added like once like TensorFlow just came out as an open source.
Exactly.
Everybody went crazy about it. Hey, TensorFlow is open source. We
So
can do as much as machine learning as we can.
so for MLOps, I see in the machine learning there's every library every new day. So there's new library
Yeah,
every day, and I think yeah,
there is a lot. I feel that
there's a lot.
you know, once I just had this thought. This is something that Stanford guys used to do 10 years back then when TensorFlow was not available to me in hand. And I saw the evolution of TensorFlow, right? 2015 it got open sourced. I was class 10 passed out. 2017 entered the engineering. 2017 mid started off with some ML thing. Then
Mhm.
2019 I saw TensorFlow 2.0 beta, which is being released out from the Google office. And I was like, wow, that's a state of an art releases that are happening. Of course, like when the Flipkart Big Billion Day outage happened, that was our first experience. You know what? Websites do go down. That was our first experience. Yeah, I think that's how it is. So it's just the standard practices that you are just inculcating through operations. That's it.
Right.
You're making a standard operation procedure for all the things which were manual back then. That's what DevOps operations attached to all these things I'm saying. Yes, I think let's go to the next one because scaling platforms today are playing with a lot of trade-offs and development processes getting a little worse to a kind of an extent because we still don't know where to scale. We still don't know where to put the serverless. Of course, we
Yeah.
we still have people who are migrating from serverless to Kubernetes because they thought serverless was great, but cost hit them very hard. Now they are
Yeah.
migrating back to Kubernetes. So scaling platforms today are a lot of trade-offs, and development process is just going vague. What is it today when I talk about infrastructure? So how can people learn and evolve their infrastructure practices?
So one thing which I have seen, a lot of people right now still consider um a very basic thing about the scaling. So what for them, what exactly it is, like for example, if they have put a limit on CPU and memory, if the CPU is reaching 65% on the average, or memory was reaching on 65% of the average, we should do the auto scaling. And that's the only concern area they actually see, and according to that they set up the scaling. But it's not always true, because they have set it up, and because of that, not every time your CPU must be going up, and or not every time your memory is going up, but your application might not be responding. And because of that, your application practice, whatever the things which you have built around it is not going to work. So what I have seen, in my I have worked with a lot of clients, and while doing the consulting with them, still people are implementing them. So then I asked, how did you solve that problem? So they said that we are running the minimum replicas and the maximum replicas at the same number. So I ask again, what exactly did you did? So they are saying we are running 200 application pods at the minimum and 200 application pods at the maximum. So then I talked about why do you need the auto scaling then when you are running the minimum and the maximum at the same time. So they say that our application does not consume too much of the CPU and the memory, but still it goes unresponsive sometimes. So we need this much of the capacity. Then I talked about it, and I talked about it what kind of application you guys are using. So they talked about it that it's a pub/sub kind of application where we are producing something and our application is consuming something. So on the basis of queue length we need to scale the consumers. And then we talked about when you have to scale it on the number of consumers, then why are you putting CPU and the memory as a auto scaling factor? It's not going to work anyhow. So instead of that, you should keep it like on a custom factor, like for example the queue length or something like that. And then the question arrive how we can solve these kind of problems. So then we talked about it and we suggested multiple solutions there. That since you are working in Kubernetes, it is going to solve it very easily. There are multiple tools, multiple methods available through which you can solve it. So one of the thing is that Prometheus you guys are already using. So Prometheus can be integrated with the Kubernetes through which you can do the auto scaling. Then there is a CNCF project, KEDA, Kubernetes Event Driven System. And using the KEDA, you can integrate your multiple tools, for example, Redis, Mongo, MySQL. And on the basis of that, you can, whatever the metrics you are getting, you can do the auto scaling. So they integrated the KEDA and then they started the doing the auto scaling on the basis of queue length. Now their infrastructure is running quite optimally very well. They are not consuming too much of the resources. So the min replica and the max replica factor is working fine here. So that is the one thing I see in the scaling trade-off, that it's not always your development is talking about CPU and memory. You are developing an application and every application has its own use case. And according to that, we have to think like, this is the thing which I want to go with. This is the factor I want to do the auto scaling. So based on that, people should do something like that. So that's one of the thing I see there, Vishwas.
Yeah, like you understand Linux, I think probably you're winning in the game of DevOps. I think understanding Linux end to end, like it's impossible. There's a lot to it. We are still learning. He's still learning. If you ask Sandeep sir will also say, I'm also still learning. Sorry for that, Vishwas. I also don't know much. Because what Linux gave to the world was that open source, that accessibility to the world. Like there's no SSH that has VS Code, right? If you SSH into your server, where's your VS Code? It's gone. So you still need to know how to do a nano or a Vim. You still need to understand that. So all that is basics. So I think back to basics is something that you need to get in. So now we have policy as code, governance as code, and it's changing the way in which even AWS, you want to provision an IAM role, you need to configure the policies right there.
Yeah.
So governance is already taken into the consideration. So let's talk about it. So how are all these practices that are coming up in the market are going to help in evolving the DevOps practices and also make sure that we get rid of the trade-offs that we have today? Something like you configure it on a cloud, probably there is something that is going down somewhere in your repository. Like API secrets are going down there and
Yeah.
anybody can just log into
Right. Right.
your
Right.
Pola vulnerability and things like that. So how are these practices making us evolve in those trade-offs which they used to face? And also there is a lot of auto whaling and there is a lot of other technologies which are coming up. So how is it going to be influential for the tomorrow's world?
Yeah. So which was what I actually seen. I read about a lot of security related incidents, uh, and what I have observed, the security incidents, there are very less number of security incidents because of the code side. That the application code was something through which hacker was getting in and they were able to hack something. Most of the time, it's something like that. They made their S3 bucket public for something and then they forgot. Then they made the changes inside the security group, and then the something was there. The port was open and someone was able to crack the password, enter into the SSH server, and through that he was able to enter inside the complete system. And let's say the access key, secret key is committed over the GitHub. That's one of the major use case I see, that people by mistake commit their access key and secret key, and hackers use it for like Bitcoin mining, etc., and they create tons of infrastructure over the cloud. So these are the some generic example where we see that people are doing these things. Now to that, we can not limit this on the organization level, because this is something which is depends on the person to person. A person might do it unintentionally because he was working on something and by mistakenly he's doing it, but we have to stop it at any level. So I think governance and policy as a code, I think that becomes very important here, because right now it's not only about implementing the security incident related notification, it's also about the remediating them automatically, it's always about them auto healing the infrastructure. So it's something like that whenever someone is making some change over the infrastructure that which is undesirable, or let's say which is not assuring the governance policy and is conflicting with the governance policy, it should be something which should be reverted back. Let's say I am a user and I want to do something, I made the ssh group completely open for upload, and let's say whenever I do that, it is reverting it back, something like that, because the policy is the one thing which will make sure my infrastructure is secure even if I'm making the mistake. So for example, we have seen a similar very few examples in multiple sites. For example, when you create a sign up form, and inside the sign up form when you input your information for the password, it generally puts a criteria that this is the policy for the password. It should be 14 character, a special character should be there, a password strength which should be there, something like that. And that's the same thing which as a DevOps we should also do with our infrastructure and whatever the automation ecosystem which we are developing. That if someone is violating a policy, if someone is not working on conflicting with the governance what we have defined, it should be reverted back and it should be remediated. So for example, if someone is making a change over S3 bucket, if he is making it publicly for any XYZ reason, it will be reverted back to the private. If someone is making some by mistakenly committing an access key or secret key, and if we are getting a notification from the AWS that an access key secret key is committed from your account, it should be automatically disabled right now and deleted. Something like that should happen, and people are doing it, to be honest. For example, just right now I can take a use case in which environment and a client of Opstree where we are exactly doing this kind of thing. We have created this policy, so if when someone is coming into the system and making any change into the system, whether it's security group, S3, EBS, anything, it will be automatically reverted back. So on that level we are doing this kind of thing, and I think it's a long process, to be honest. It took around 3 to 4 months to us as well to implement this complete practice, only this practice other than the infrastructure. But I think it's worth it, because then I can have assurance that if someone is violating something, I have a safety net.
Yeah, I think even Terraform. We were talking about the Giant Cloud, right? Giant Cloud was bought by Samsung. Now they are a private cloud providers, but like I was shocked to see that Terraform is actually solving more of the problem statements. Like
Right.
you get an access to the misconfiguration and the worst practices that you can get onto your code through your portal that used to just be click click click. That's getting solved because of the code, because there is a visibility of everything and anything which is happening. There are cloud scanners, there are cloud tools which are already available. That means you can really detect misconfigurations before you deploy it onto an infrastructure.
Right.
So now there are trade-offs in building a scalable infrastructure, in building the security as well. Like sometimes Log4j was not known until it was made a CVE
CV.
in the entire portals and everything. So
Exactly.
yeah, so how is it all about when we are building a secure, scalable, and account environment? How world is moving towards approaching it in doing it right? Because there are no hammer and a nail method which just says that, you know what, you hit like this, it's going to go in, or else it's going to be a successful journey. It's just an evolving culture that is happening. So
Exactly, it's always going
how
forward.
is the DevOps practices evolving in this front in terms of building that great environment for the production?
I think I can take an example of my open source projects on which I work on. So the thing with the open source Vishwas that I'm not the only developer.
Yeah.
I have the complete world as a developer. I have open source my project, and if people are willing to contribute on it, people are contributing. And the thing is that there are a lot of things which I cannot review every time. For example, if I talk about, I can review their logic, I can review, but if they are importing some library, I cannot make sure that library is up to date and the library is compliant or not. because they are importing tons of libraries. I cannot go to every library and check their code base. So that I need some kind of automation system which can ensure that if they are importing a library, I'm doing a thoroughly check of that library. And that is very easily possible because since we have the CV databases, we simply have to check the version of the library and the library name, that if it is available in the CV, and what is the kind of vulnerability we have. And according to that, we have a lot of automation tools created around it. So this is something which I have integrated in my all open source projects. So whenever someone is doing something, I can get the information really easily about it. So that's one thing. But this is the talking about the open source project, but it's not limited to open source projects. If someone is building their own ecosystem, let's say they are creating the ecosystem of the build and release, they can inculcate the practices there very easily in terms of the security and the governance. So for example, let's say when you are talking about um, the Terraform, or let's say when you are talking about something containerized infrastructure, there you can also have the policy. So for example, in Kubernetes, you can have an open policy agent which can ensure that if you are making any kind of security loophole while deploying your application or a privilege escalation, it will make sure it is blocking you. Similar to that, that same thing you can do over the AWS as well, where you are creating the policies. If someone is creating an infrastructure in a non-secure way, it is going to always restrict them that cannot create it because it's not fulfilling the policy. So it is something talking about the infrastructure and all those things, but it comes from the very beginning where we are building the code. Because as a part of a developer, when I have created my application code base, I should make sure that I am doing a security application static application security testing of my application, so that I know that I have not imported any vulnerable libraries in my application code base. My coding logics are not potentially accesses across site scripting attackable surface. So according to that, I have to do the changes in my application. But the same thing can be done by the DevOps as well. They integrate this thing in the pipeline. And if we find that they find any kind of vulnerabilities inside their application, they can simply terminate the pipeline and notify the developer you should fix it. And after that, once that part is done, there are multiple steps which we can do there. For example, if their application code is there, um, then the next thing could be like the application could be dockerized or non-dockerized, and according to that we can define the further steps. Let's take an example. If the application is dockerized, we can check the quality of our docker file. The docker file, if they have written it in the proper fashion or not. Are they following the best practices? Is there any security who loophole they have defined inside the docker file? Then we can do the image scanning, and once all these things are done, we can upload it over the container registry. And when we are talking about the deployment, so this is the build part. But when we are doing the deployment as well, we have to make sure that we are fulfilling all the security practices. So there should be some policies which will be ensuring that when we are deploying the application, we are fulfilling all the security practices. If not, they will stop from us for the deployment, that you cannot deploy this application. So that kind of thing, an ecosystem which we have to build. And I really see that an open source world is helping us to build that ecosystem, because there are n number of tools are available which can help us to build the system. It's not like we need a paid tool or we need an enterprise tool to build this ecosystem. Because what I have seen, most of the companies have built this ecosystem with the open source tool as well. For example, OWASP Zap is a pretty much famous dynamic application security testing tool, and it's an open source. You can simply use it. Similarly, you have the OWASP dependency check, which can check for the SAST analysis for your application. That is also open source. So there are
Even
multiple
some of the
companies.
companies have open sourced it for the public repositories as well. Like
Yeah.
OWASP is also available, like SAS, Deep Source. You can think
Right.
of it like it's still there for the public
Even
repository.
the enterprise companies are also taking it seriously, so they are providing a community edition. For example, Snike is one of the company.
Yeah,
Yeah, so they are providing a community edition. So they have the enterprise solution, but let's say if you cannot afford it, but with a fewer less features, you can still go with the community edition to fulfill your requirements.
I think even they are integrated with a Docker registry as well.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
if you just see like 2020 before that, like there was no vulnerabilities or CVs which was seen on the containers, but today you can see it
Yeah.
on your Docker registry.
Exactly. That is there. And not only that, let's say a lot of thing I have seen around it, like for example, people have seen the issues while this ecosystem, that there are people who are committing their secret access code and all those things inside the application code base, and somehow it is getting leaked and causing the issues. So people are integrating something there which can catch these access code and secret codes as well. And according to that, they can notify us that you have committed a password or something like that in your application code base. You should remove it. So the solutions are developed till that level. We just need to inculcate in our ecosystem and use it.
No, I actually have an experience here. Like I had actually put Terraform, I had to
Access to
IAM
secret
role
codes.
keys and access keys
Ah,
into the GitHub repository, and instantly I got an email saying that you have compromised this access key. I was also shocked. That's what you were saying, right? It's all there for the scanning tools.
exactly.
Yeah, I think last ending note. I just wanted to know what really motivated you to be a DevOps engineer, because a lot of times we miss on that. We don't see that, because to me I've seen my mentors and teachers who are solutions architects who are still working on DevOps and a lot of things. So what really motivated you for the world of DevOps?
Um, so basically, one thing I really like about the DevOps and work as a DevOps engineer, that I see the every day I see a different thing. For example, let's say if I'm working today, I'm working with a client, and it's not like that I'm doing the same repetitive work which I did yesterday, because I see a lot of people are doing the repetitive work, and I usually think like how people are working these things, because this is something they have done and they are doing it again and again. But in the DevOps industry, if I have to do that, I can automate it. But every day there's a new issue for me, there's a new thing for me on which I have to work on. And let's say if I find a solution online, I generally go with that solution. But if I'm not finding that solution, I generally think like why not, let's build it. Let's build an open source solution which can help the people, because that's how I got my solution. It's always about give and take. Open source has given so much to me, let's contribute back. So so that's one thing I talk about. But that's one of the major area which motivates me to work as a DevOps professional, because every day I get to learn a lot of new things. It's a new learning every day. And to be honest, I mentored by a lot of great people at Offstream.
Yeah, in Obsti, you just get a chance to meet a lot of great people. Don't worry about it. If you
Exactly,
want, join
exactly.
us. Please join us. Yeah,
So that's actually always motivates me, because they I always get an appreciation for my work. And I always get a genuine feedback on my work. So basically, I still whenever I develop something, I go to the certain people and I talk about them. Will you review it? Will you give me a feedback about it? And they will provide me a genuine feedback about it. And according to that, I generally ask, will it be a good fit in the DevOps ecosystem? Can we contribute it to the open source community? And then according to that, I made a decision that I want to contribute it back, or let's say optimize the existing solution which is available in the market. So that's one thing. But for me, the greater joy about working as a DevOps professional is that having a sense of satisfaction every day, that I learned a new thing.
true. That's true. I think I'm also happy that I'm part of Obsti, that I'm getting a chance to learn something new. Like amazing folks. I think great chance. If you get a chance to work here, just start working. I would love to say that. I think thank you so much, Abhishek, for being on my show. Means a lot in your busy schedule. Of course,
So
we rescheduled it many times, but yeah, we were able to get you on the show once. So thank you so much for that. And of course, folks, I'm calling him again and again because I don't know why. Because Obsti guys have that magic, and we need to understand more about their practices, their journey, and there's a lot to learn. So stay tuned. And this is Vishwas Nayan signing off from the show. And thanks for Abhishek for being on my show, brother. Means a
uh,
lot.
thank you, Ishwas. Thank you so much.
Sure, we are ending the broadcast now.